much. It's sometimes kind of both intimidating and pleasing to follow on from your feature supervisor in a talk. Hopefully the older that I get, it's more pleasing than intimidating, and hopefully, having been in my 50s, I'm no longer intimidated by senior academics. But, I will say that it was a fantastic source of knowledge as somebody trying to navigate their PhD, and I'm really pleased that I'm able to share the platform here with you tonight. I will complement what Ahmed has said and probably deal more with the contemporary issues facing Syria, and perhaps just paint a portrait of why it is so difficult and why it has defied any easy solutions, and why we find ourselves nearly 6 years on still facing the same situation. And you can compare Syria to whatever else that you want, but I'll do it here in two ways. We should remember that to the west of Syria, Lebanon itself suffered through a 15-year-long civil war. So when the degree of political chaos and interference from outside agencies is to the kind of degree that it is, you can expect extended periods of conflict without any kind of political resolution. I don't think we're going to see that time frame in Syria, but I don't think that the end is quite finished yet. And you can go to the east of Syria and look at Iraq. And Iraq, by relative to Syria, is straightforward. It's a binary problem. There is a legitimate and sovereign government of Iraq that needs to be assisted to defeat Islamic State, who controls part of its territory, and it needs to have its sovereignty to act. That's still a complex task in and of itself. There are also a number of national and sub-national players, and a 17-country-strong coalition helping the Iraqi government, so it's complex in its own right, but ultimately it's a binary issue. The problem with the Syrian conflict is it's not a binary issue. It's not simply the government of Syria against a range of opposition players. However, for some countries, so when we're talking about Iran and Russia, in policy terms it's a binary problem for them. They are supporting the Assad regime against anybody who's against the Assad regime. That makes your policy decisions, that makes your decision making in military operational terms quite straightforward. For the West, and the United States in particular, it's what we sometimes call a wicked problem. A problem of such complexity that there are no good options, there are only less worse options. And if you're somebody who is ideologically opposed to military intervention, unless you understand what the end state and the ultimate aim and how do I get out of here, like President Obama was, then your range of options are quite limited. And if you layer upon that a series of erstwhile allies in regional states such as Turkey, a fellow NATO ally, Saudi Arabia, for instance, Qatar, all of whom host US bases, all of whom are interfering in different ways, following separate agendas that sometimes align with Washington, sometimes don't align with Washington, then it's very difficult for you to come up with a coherent and effective and holistic policy approach to Syria. Added to that is, you know, that a country like Russia has long-standing, nearly half-century-long bilateral defence relationships with Syria that were first with the Soviet Union in 1992, but devolved to then Russia. So there's a depth of experience, there's a depth of bilateral relationships, and there's a political and strategic depth of the relationship between Russia and Syria that the United States has never had. It's never been in the US's area of influence. So all of those make things very difficult. So when we throw around terms like no-fly zones or like safe zones, what I'd ask everybody to think about is, don't think about the term, think about what that actually means. What does a no-fly zone mean? No-fly zone requires an immense amount of military effort to be effective. It requires kind of rules of engagement that very robust, but it's also extremely easily defeated. You have to understand what's your aim of a no-fly zone. What do you mean by a safe zone? You want to make Syrian civilians safe. Well, what does that mean? I don't want to risk the United States' lives in a hopeless contest if you're President Obama. I understand what happened in Iraq, and you have to remember President Obama was one of the few politicians at the time who argued against intervention in Iraq. He's a non-interventionist. But I would reiterate what Ahmed said. In one of the issues that we're going to face in the long term in a country like Syria, when you try and put the country back together, again, is this notion of identities. A Syrian national identity, any kind of national identity, is a very strong factor in making a very coherent society. What this has done has split apart the national identity and made people concentrate, all people, but a range of people concentrate in the sub-national identities. Are you a Turkmen? Are you a Kurd? Are you an Arab? Are you a Druze? Are you an Alawi? Are you a Christian? Are you a Sunni? It's very difficult once you have the kind of national society exploded to try and put that back together. And we also have to look at the nature of the insurgency. So when we talk about the Syrian regime, when we talk about the Syrian opposition, who is the Syrian opposition? There is no one Syrian opposition. We talk about the Free Syrian Army. What is the Free Syrian Army? The Free Syrian Army, at least in the early days, was a series of largely defectors from the Syrian military who went back to their areas of recruitment and formed armed opposition groups against the regime. Some of them were supported effectively, some weren't supported effectively, but in terms of a coherent and centralised command structure, it didn't really exist. So if you wanted to get the Free Syrian Army to do an operation against the Syrian regime, there was no army to do an operation against the Syrian regime. There were a series of small groups to do it. At the same time, there's been a plethora of other armed opposition groups. You see the YPG, or the Kurds in the northeast of Syria. You see a range of Islamist groups, not only Islamic State, Jabhat al-Nusra, now Jabhat al-Sham, so the Al-Qaeda aligned factions. We see Ahrar al-Sham al-Islamiyya, a non-prescribed Islamist group, and all of them forming coalitions, none of which are particularly static at any one time, so individuals leech from group to group. We've seen over 30,000 foreign fighters operating in Syria and Iraq, 2/3 of those from within the region. Tunisia, Saudi Arabia and Jordan, the three largest contributors in that respect. It's a very difficult problem. But then we look at countries who are trying to reinforce their interests in Syria. So we see last week, we saw the Iranian government sign contracts for phosphate mining. We saw contracts for agricultural land purchase from the Iranian government. And we saw, perhaps most importantly, telecommunications contract signed with the Iranian government. Iran has given lines of credit of, at last we know, about $4.5 billion in lines of credit to the Syrian regime. These are investments that the Iranians are making in Syria, on top of hundreds of Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps members who have been killed. Between 1,000 and 1,500 Hezbollah have been killed supporting the Assad regime. So you see the kind of elements that are supporting the Assad regime have invested. They've invested in the way that Western governments haven't invested, for all the reasons that you would understand. They believe the risk that they need to accept in supporting the Assad regime suits their strategic end states. It doesn't suit Western strategic end states. And we also saw Russia re-sign bilateral security agreements for another 49 years with the Syrian government, and the expansion of the Tartus naval base to take double the number of ships that it is capable of doing, and formalising the relationship with the Syrian government for the airbase of the northwest of Syria that it's recently established since it intervened in 2015. They signal that they're in for the long haul. Russia will signal that we've been here for half a century, we're going to be here for half a century more. It's a very, very public messaging to anybody else that any kind of political settlement in Syria is going to be driven by those countries who have supported the Assad regime. And I can't tell you what the form of the future government of Syria is going to be, but I would argue that it's not going to be antithetical to Russian or Iranian interests. How you bundle that up, I'm not sure, and there's a lot of water to pass under the bridge, but the kind of investment in blood and treasure that those countries have made dwarfs the kind of investments that other countries have made. So the other difficulties that we see with the United States, it was very difficult for them. They had no leverage in Syria. Russians and the Iranians had the Syrian government to back. The Turks had largely turned a blind eye and believed that Assad would fall in a very short period of time, so there was no plan B in the event that he didn't. So it was a relatively free pass of anybody who wanted to go south from Turkey into Syria to join the opposition in the mistaken assumption that they would be able to control whatever happened because it would be over relatively quickly and we'd have free entry on a 900-kilometre border. When that didn't happen, problems began inside. Now the US found it very difficult to back any kind of ally because it didn't trust their ideological end state is probably the best way to describe it. They were also very reticent to provide any kind of significant weapons to them because you lose control of them as soon as they cross the border. Unless you accompany that weapon from the point at which you give it to somebody to the point at which it's used, you really don't have any idea how it's used, who it's passed on to, what its end user is going to be. So that's a risk that you can't run, and that's a risk that President Obama was not willing to take. So simply saying we should arm the opposition, you have to understand what arming the opposition means, and you have to be accountable for the kind of weapons that you put into a country and who they go to and how they're used. These are all really complex tactical level issues that have real strategic consequences to them. But it's also been said that Syria is the most socially mediated conflict today, and I would agree with that. Anybody who follows the conflict, you can have social media access to live operations from Syrian forces, Syrian opposition forces, that are uploaded within the hour of them happening, sometimes live as they happen. We can go off in a completely different avenue and look at how that affects the notions of foreign fighters and why people in the West have travelled in pursuit of a notion of religious identity, having been influenced by social media, but that's a separate presentation in itself. But it is very interesting in the Syrian context how that has happened, and I'm not sure that I or many other people understand how this identity transfer that's able to happen across the social media space impacts on people. I'm not sure how it happens. But one of the disconcerting things about the fact that it does happen is, as we all know in the social media space, accuracy is not necessarily its strong point. So if you have inaccurate information, if you have people who don't engage intellectually with a subject, then you can go, in a policy perspective, off on one way, but in this kind of socially mediated age, it influences the way that people act, as we've seen, we didn't anticipate. And I use that as an intro to another point that I'd like to make, understanding that I'm running out of time. Aleppo was in the title, so I just wanted to focus a little bit, for just a couple of minutes, on the battle for Aleppo. And it's an interesting case study from an advocacy and social media perspective. Those of you who followed it and remembered it, there was an enormous outpouring from a whole range of people that the West needed to do something to stop the slaughter in Aleppo. The broadly accepted figure from places like the BBC and advocacy groups was 250,000 people trapped in East Aleppo, being mercilessly bombarded by the Russians and the Assad regime. The reality is, when everything was, and some advocacy groups said 250,000, 100,000 children. That became the accepted norm, and that became the accepted norm as one of the rationales for Western intervention, that we have to do something. when the smoke cleared on the battlefield and the UN was able to actually count who moved where, there were about 30,000 people moved out of Aleppo to Idlib, to the rebel-controlled areas. About 38,000 moved out of eastern Aleppo to western Aleppo, so the government-controlled areas. And about 50,000 people stayed in Aleppo. When you count all those up, there were just over 100,000 people in total in eastern Aleppo. So while the argument was there's 250,000 people in there, we need to get them out, there's actually 100,000 people. Now, 100,000, 250,000, does that matter? On one point, no, it doesn't matter, they're just figures. On the other hand, it does, because people try and motivate people to take action based on that. The other figure that's never mentioned is the 8,000 armed elements in eastern Aleppo. Now, if anybody knows anything about the Russian way of war, you will know that they manoeuvre by fire. What I mean by that is they don't worry too much about targeting, they just throw lots of projectiles at the target and they pick up the pieces up. That was the Soviet way of fighting, it tends to be the Russian way of fighting. But they don't do that unless there are people there. And while they're in breach of international humanitarian law by not taking proper notion of the consequences of indiscriminate targeting, all armed elements are equally in breach of international humanitarian law because you are not allowed to deploy armed forces amongst the civilian population. Now that's an academic argument on one hand, but if your aim, your complete aim, is to save civilian lives, and you know the Russian and the Syrian governments have now encircled Aleppo, and you know that they are on the ascendancy, there is no way that international pressure is going to stop them from pulverising that city. Where are the voices saying all armed elements need to leave that city now? If your ultimate aim is to save civilian lives, then there are two sides to the argument. There are people who are perpetrating these high explosive missions into civilian areas, and there are armed elements inside the civilian areas providing the targets and not moving out of them. So I mean, I don't say one way or the other, but I'm just saying you need to intellectually engage with this discussion. And if your ultimate aim is to save civilian lives, you might need to look at what both sides are doing. And you have no chance of changing the military approach of the Syrian government and Russians, but you may have some chance of forcing, through public pressure, armed elements to leave once the game is up. There was no way they were going to survive in Aleppo, so why not just leave? Now, the future. The past is bleak, the future is quite uncertain. Why is that? Obviously, it's very difficult, as Nathan pointed out. A lot of countries interfering in Syria. The Americans finally found a partner in the Kurds, so they made who they could work with, who are considered to be not influential enough that they would change the nature of the Syrian government, confined to a certain geographic area, and quite good fighters who can be trusted with a series of weapons. The problem is they are Kurds and they have their own secondary strategic aims, which means carving out a particular area in northeastern Syria for them. That's antithetical to Turkish interests, of course. So we now have US-backed forces, Kurdish forces successfully fighting in the northeast and putting pressure on Raqqa, at the same time as Turks have now headed south to stop the two Kurdish groups coalescing into a coherent landmass. So now they're projecting in central northern Syria into Syria, both trying to take the city of Al-Bab as we speak, with Turkish-backed Syrian Arab forces coming from the north at the same time as Syrian government forces are coming from the south, wondering who's going to get there first. In the north west of the country, we now see the bad opposition, if you want to call them like that, the hardcore Islamist opposition, now becoming increasingly concentrated in and around Idlib and attracting more and more not only Russian but now US attack aircraft. And we have a Syrian regime who is confident that the future belongs to them, but they can't generate enough combat power to take over the country. They simply can't. They're exhausted after 6 years of fighting. but they show every intention of doing so because, except for the 2 provincial capitals that they have lost, they have maintained Syrian government footprint in places that are very isolated. So Deir ez-Zor, outside in the east of Syria, there's a Syrian government footprint that comes at great cost to the Syrian government surrounded by Islamic State. Why would you do that when it's so expensive? That's because you believe eventually you'll take over charge of that place again, and that you need everybody to know that the Syrian government is still a sovereign authority. So if you're in Deir ez-Zor and you want your birth certificate or you want a Syrian passport and you're in the opposition controlled areas, you have to come from the opposition controlled areas into government controlled Deir ez-Zor to the Syrian government office, get a copy of your birth certificate, get a copy of your high school certificate, apply for your passport. Because none of the opposition groups have sovereignty, none of the opposition groups can do that. So the government is always trying to maintain its footprint because it believes that whatever political solution that comes in the future will suit them, and they have to be the ones able to take advantage of that. Now, I think I've gone over time, and that's covered a lot of area, but I think now it's time for me to sit down.